This is Dateline News and Conversation. The topic tonight, oh, Canada. A good friend, been a while since he's been on the show, Rick Walker from Canada. We're going to talk about all things Canadian tonight, including how they're feeling about becoming the 51st state. Rick, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here. An honor. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks. It's mutual. Okay. Trump has been in an office now a little over a month. Oh my God. There's a lot to talk about, especially a little bit later in the show. I want to talk about that Oval Office encounter on Friday that has got the whole world in a tailspin. But first of all, Rick, your reaction and the Canadian reaction to Trump wanting to make you the 51st state and appoint a governor. What are your thoughts?
It's ripping our country apart already. I'll tell you that. It's much more serious than a lot of people realize.
Really?
Oh yes, I think he's as serious as a heart attack on this. People have been dismissing it because the United States and Canada have always been the best of friends growing up. The border was basically open. You could cross the border, just show your driver's license. That's the North America that I grew up in. It's changed since 9/11. But what's going on now is just Trump's words alone have reignited separatist movements within Canada. You have a strong, of course, French population in Quebec, which just has a very long history of yearning for separation from Canada, mostly on cultural and historical issues, going all the way back to France and the establishment of Canada. And then on the western side of the country, you have a strong Western separatist movement, known primarily as Wexit in these modern times, but they're upset with the inability to get their oil to market. They feel that they've been denied the opportunity to develop their resources and realize their full potential economically and culturally in the western part of Canada. And that's created this real animosity between the Laurentian elites, as they call them here in Canada, in Quebec and parts of Ontario and the capital region, Ottawa, and the people out in Western Canada who pay what they call transfer payments here because they're oil rich. So the government, in order to just make sure that there is, in the view of the government, fairness across the country, they take money from have provinces, like say Alberta, where they have a lot of oil wealth, and they'll distribute some of those funds to have not provinces where they don't have as much wealth, to places like the Maritimes out on the East Coast where the fishing industry is not doing well, or up into the Northwest Territories in the Arctic where people are living but don't have as much access to wealth, and there's not as much opportunity, but you need people to live up there. So we're a complex country, and this is where we're trying to make sure that everybody has health care, for instance, and everybody has access to social programs, and that there's a standard of living that everybody is able to enjoy. But this, people in Western Canada feel resentful in a lot of ways to what Quebec has done because they block pipelines. They can't get their oil to market. That has created a situation where we have to run our pipelines from Alberta down and through the United States and then back up into Ontario to just get that Alberta oil to market. And even then, you can't get it out on the East Coast to Tidewater. So this is a problem because the people in Alberta feel like the people in Quebec are preventing them from realizing their full potential economically. And what Trump has done is this is like it's taken a match and it's thrown it on gasoline that has just been laying there for years waiting to be reignited. And these separatist sentiments are run very deep. They run back to the foundation of our country, and certainly to the time when the first Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, was the prime minister in this country, when we had an actual separatist crisis on our hands called the FLQ crisis, where it resulted in basically terrorist actions on Canadian soil. And that's when the First Emergencies Act was used by Pierre Trudeau. He used it to crush the dissent of the FLQ. And this is all bringing it all back up.
Wow. So I have to ask you this. I just was wondering if this was just another one of Trump's off the cuff, we're going to take Greenland, we're going to take Canada, and we're going to take the Panama Canal, and I'm going to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. All of this, in one paragraph almost. Do you think he was really serious about it? Now, I understand what you're saying, how it's thrown fuel on the fire in Canada with the separatist feelings that exist. But do you think Trump is really serious? And are people in Canada, some of them wanting to be the 51st state?
He's 100,000 million% serious, in my view. And even some of the most serious academics, politicians, our political leaders, that I don't think they really saw this coming. They have dismissed this from the beginning as a joke. I've been telling people here for over 2 years that Canada is in play. Couldn't really tell what it was that was behind it all, but I could tell from some of the information warfare going on online that a lot of that, and just political things going on, that somebody wanted to get their hands on our country. And I think a lot of countries want to exploit Canada in a variety of ways, because that's always kind of going on. But this what's going on with Trump, this connects all the dots. Finally, after 2 years of me warning people about this, I just couldn't tell which country or where it was coming from. And it's not because it's coming from the United States per se, but it's coming from Trump and the MAGA movement. And it's coming directly from Trump. Trump wants this because he's also subscribing to this new worldview. And I think Vladimir Putin subscribes to this, where the world will be divided up into hemispheres of influence and dominance by the great powers. And that's really what's at play here. Trump sees Canada, Mexico, all the way down into Panama, Central America, maybe even further, as a geographic block, which eventually the United States will dominate. He'll just absorb these other countries, or the U.S. will over time, even naturally, or even just by some sort of coercion. And then you'll have Russia, in whether this comes true or not, but some people view it this way. And I think Trump is of this mind, where Russia will naturally over time reassert its dominance over Eurasia, a Eurasian landmass, which may even include much of Europe. And then you have China, which has emerged as a great power as well, that will dominate its sphere of influence in Asia. So I think that's where it's going. Trump is operating at, if you'll excuse the phrase, warp speed. He's in a real rush. He's got 4 years. There's a movement underway called Project. There's a third-term project. They want to change the Constitution so he can remain in power longer. But this movement is afoot, and he's absolutely dead serious about it. And you don't have the president of the United States repeating over and over and over again, no, I'm serious. I'm really going to do it. I really mean it, multiple times without, I don't know. It's just people are disarmed. It's like some people are like, he's just joking. But no, you can see the politicians now finally waking up to this existential threat to our country. The Liberal leadership race is on right now to replace Justin Trudeau. And this is the topic that dominated the leadership debate this past week. This is what they were talking about, just this.
Wow. You know, I really agree with your description or assessment of the emerging hemispheres of influence. I really do think that's a big part of it. And I agree with you. I think Trump sees this Western hemisphere as his sphere, America's sphere of influence, the Monroe Doctrine. You know, this is our hemisphere, all the way down to South America. So you communists, you Russians don't come in here, but now it's you Chinese don't come in here. No, nobody come in here. Now, realistically, I think there's real problems in terms of politics and law on whether Trump really could annex Canada. I don't know. Canada would. I hope he really doesn't want to make it a 51st state. You know, I studied in Canada for 4 years when I was in college down in Niagara Falls, and I loved the country. I mean, my heritage is French-speaking Canada, and you know, growing up, it was hockey and Canada and Montreal Canadiens, Toronto Maple Leafs. To me and to us, there was no difference. It was Canada, and I had a professor in college up there in Niagara Falls. He was a history teacher, and he said that Canada was going to be the country, excuse me, of the 21st century, because all of its resources and its enormous landmass. And until now, the only real threat to grabbing that is coming from Trump. I don't think it's ever happened before that. I mean, certainly Russia was never trying to grab Canada. They sold Alaska. So anyway, I'm sorry to hear that it's causing such divisiveness in Canada. I hate to see that happening. I know there are other issues, and we'll talk about some of them here in just a minute. But what I would hope, Rick, and I'd like your final thought on that, is I would hope that Trump and Canada could rediscover the relationship, the partnership, without this ridiculous bullshit of making Canada the 51st state. My God, Canada's landmass, I think, is larger than America's landmass, for crying out loud. But your final thoughts on that, on how this might really evolve.
I've said from the beginning, this is completely unnecessary. We've been the best of friends, the strongest of allies through thick and thin since really since Confederation here in Canada in 1867 and beyond and before that. If he wants to help securing the border and cracking down on drugs, all he had to do is to say, "Hey, could we work together to crack down on the drug problem?" And yeah, we'll help. We don't want that happening either. But what he's doing here is he's punching us in the face, his best friend, and scaring the heck out of people. And it's completely unnecessary. He's saying we need to secure the northern border and the Arctic. And we're already working with you on that. It makes no sense. It's just in my view, there are other things motivating this beyond national security. National security is even just an excuse for this to happen. This is about oil. This is about money. This is about the rise of the oligarchs, I believe, in the White House, taking over the government. It's almost like a corporate coup, is what I called it last night, because you have the richest group of billionaires ever assembled, controlling in the cabinet, the Trump administration, the government now. Like, it's just a bunch of billionaires, including the people from the tech sector. And you have billionaires like Kevin O'Leary in Canada flying down to Mar-a-Lago with Daniel Smith, the premier of oil-rich Alberta, to meet with Trump separately from all the other premiers she's saying, I'm not going to work with, I'm separate. I'm not on Team Canada. I'm on Team Alberta. And then she goes down there with this rich guy to Mar-a-Lago to what? Make a deal? Kevin O'Leary, the reason he went down there, he's not elected, and he got a lot of attention almost speaking for Canada. And he's involved in politics too. But he's a rich political and business figure in Canada who appears on television a lot. He wanted to meet with Trump because he has business interests. He has investments in pipelines. He has investments in social media. He went down there because he wants to buy TikTok, which has been in a subject of national security that has been controversial in the U.S. with Trump. And he wants to set up an AI research center in Canada. I think almost like an extension of that $500 billion AI research facility that Trump announced with all those other tech oligarchs, I think on day 2 or day 3 of his new administration when he had that news conference. And O'Leary wants to do it in Alberta because you need massive amounts of energy to run those AI research facilities. So this is the kind of thing that's really playing out. This is about really, really rich people, in my view, oligarchs, if you will, just asserting their influence, whether it's Elon Musk through Starlink and Tesla and SpaceX, or whether it's Mark Zuckerberg who kissed the ring, or Jeff Bezos who also went to the White House for the inauguration, finally capitulating and bending the knee to the Trumpster, and therefore got a front row seat during the inauguration to signal their compliance and loyalty to the king. This is what's going on. And so that's why they want Alberta. Alberta is actually the prize. And then if they get Saskatchewan, that's great too. If they get the rest of the country, he'll be happy with that as well, because we have minerals in Ontario that he probably wants. But Alberta is what they're really, really after. And that's the country, that's the province that is easiest for him to get, because the separatist sentiment is so strong out there, and it's being ramped up. Even last night, I see key figures within a certain political movement, the Wexit movement out in Alberta, ramping up the 51st state rhetoric. There are even billboards now that it went up almost instantly as soon as Trump started this rhetoric on highways in Alberta, promoting the 51st state agenda. So it's coming.
Yeah. You mentioned something else that I think is really important. The billionaires that surrounded Trump and his administration. My view on this for a long time has been, this isn't about the United States of America. The government has been co-opted, some say by Israel, Zionist Jews, but there's a group of super wealthy people above all of this that I believe are behind everything that's happening in the world today. Every war, every conflict, every business deal, and the consolidation of money that I believe is on top of it all. I think it's a mistake to look and put the blame on Trump or America. It's just being used as a battering ram. Anyway, before this 51st state thing happened, you had a political crisis in Canada. Justin Trudeau is on the way out. What brought that on? I know very little, but I know that a lot of people were very unhappy with a lot of policies that his administration passed, laws that really, in the minds of many people, violated some really core values of Canada and Canadian people. Your thoughts on Trudeau, his administration, his legacy, and he's on the way out. What's going to happen next?
He's probably the least popular or the most unpopular prime minister in Canadian history at this point. His biggest mistake was the way he reacted during the pandemic, proceeding with, pretty strong lockdowns, among the strongest in the world. I wouldn't say the strongest or most authoritarian, but pretty darn close. I was, very upset about that as a Canadian. He also didn't handle the Freedom Convoy in a way that, it was, he shouldn't have been as heavy-handed with it as he was, because just the optics on it alone were damaging to the government and public trust there. Not to say that he wasn't entirely justified. There were some justifications for what he did using the Emergencies Act at the time to bring in police after allowing that protest to continue for over 3 weeks. But he didn't, he made mistakes, and it's really come back to bite him. What caused him to announce that he is going to be resigning was that meeting with Trump when he went down to Mar-a-Lago himself just after Trump's election. And he met Trump, and that's where Trump called him the governor. And he went down there to try to, just to say thank you and to congratulate Trump. And then it turned into this political bloodbath because Trump called him the governor, said that Canada should be the 51st state, and then began the threat of bringing in tariffs. And Trudeau came back, and it was devastating for him politically because it just started this whole, this is all Justin Trudeau's fault rhetoric. I don't subscribe to that. I think that this is Trump's fault. This particular round of turmoil, he's the one threatening Canada. He's the one with an economic gun to our heads. He's the one threatening us with 25% across the board tariffs. And it isn't just Canada. He's doing it to everybody. All the traditional U.S. allies, Mexico, EU, everybody's getting it. But Trudeau's taken a real hit on this. And then there's a lot of confusion about how this is going and the process and all of this. They're saying that he resigned, but he didn't really resign. And now the prime minister is going to be selected, not elected, because when they go through the leadership process, within days now, we will have a new prime minister, and that will be the person who is selected by the party to become the prime minister, because we haven't had an election yet. The way the parliamentary system works is the leader of the party that has the most seats in parliament is the prime minister. So because there's a leadership convention that is about to take place, whoever wins, if it's Mark Carney, the former Bank of England governor and former Bank of Canada governor, he doesn't currently have a seat in the House of Commons. He's not been elected to office. So he would become the leader of the party and then the prime minister without ever actually been elected in an election. But it's not inappropriate because it has happened in the past, and there's great incentive for him to then call an election immediately or very soon thereafter, because he can't actually sit in the House of Commons. He's very restricted in what he can do as the prime minister. He has to appoint someone to represent him in the House of Commons, even during question period, until he gets elected to a seat. When he has to win either a by-election in a riding and get elected to office locally in a riding like every other member of parliament, or if he calls an election, then he would have an opportunity to run like everybody else as well. That's what will likely happen. That is what has happened in the past when this has transpired. People don't understand the process. It's a little bit complicated, especially if you don't live here. So it's being spun up through political narratives and some propaganda, I would say, from outside sources, outside governments, where they're trying to portray Canada as some sort of a dictatorship, where now we're going to have a prime minister who's unelected, selected by the party, like it's a communist thing or something. But it isn't really quite like that. There's just a process that has to play out. And that's why Justin Trudeau is still right now the prime minister and still is running the country with his cabinet while this process takes place. The functions of government continue. He's still elected, but he'll step down. He'll resign as soon as the new leader is in place. And then the election will follow after that.
Rick, we're talking about Canadian politics, Justin Trudeau and his exit stage left. But I want to mention something else and get your take on it. You know, when Trudeau went down to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump, Trump was quoted as saying he told Justin Trudeau that he had to fire Chrystia Freeland because he said she's terrible and quote unquote a whack. And he also um, took aim at somebody else that I guess is in the running. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Pierre Poilievre.
Yes.
Uh, what's going on with that? And Chrystia Freeland is well known to a lot of people who I think might be listening to this and watching this is somebody who's been very pro-Ukraine,
Mhm.
uh, has Nazi background in her family, and so she's a significant figure in terms of a lot of people and in relationship to Ukraine. Your thoughts?
Um, I think she has been extremely loyal to Trudeau, and he miscalculated with her because she was his finance minister. She has been very, loyal and by his side for a long time. And he kind of was in the process of throwing her under the bus because he was bringing in a pretty big budget deficit that she didn't really want to sign off on as finance minister, but he was strong arming her to do it. And what he did was, because of his waning popularity, there was internal party politics where some people wanted to replace Trudeau with Mark Carney, the former Bank of Canada and Bank of England governor. And what Trudeau did was he went to Carney and he in my view he tried to bring him in close as an advisor, seeing him as a political rival, and promised to make him the finance minister. And so he had to he went through a process where they were announcing this new budget, which was he knew would be unpopular because the deficit was going to be so big, and they wanted her to deliver the bad news. And then he was waiting in the wings to come in and replace her as finance minister. So he was getting ready to kick her to the curb after all the years of loyalty, right? And she read through that. And while she may be very unpopular in some circles, especially I know over in Russia she is, uh, she's pretty strong. And she's put up with Trudeau's crap for a long time. And she said, "No, I quit." Like the day of the announcement when she was supposed to deliver the budget in the House, she said, I resign," and left him in the lurch. And then he was scrambling to find somebody who could even present the budget in the House. Um, so there was political turmoil as a result of this because she saw what was going on. And so and now she's that's also one of the reasons that he ended up resigning, was because his cabinet ministers have been dropping like flies, resigning because they saw that their chances of reelection in the next election within the next year coming up were very low, right? Like not popular at all. And so she said, "No, you're not gonna stick it to me." I hope this is answering your question. She So this is internal liberal politics, a struggle for power within the party, and Carney being one of them, right? And so this forced the leadership review, and now she's now in there trying to take Trudeau's job because she's one of the contenders. Trump doesn't like her, really hates Chrystia Freeland because in the first Trump administration, he wanted to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement, which they did. And she led those negotiations and got a deal, which now Trump says sucks. He's saying he's the greatest deal maker in the world. And now he wants to renegotiate USMCA again, which they called the United States Mexico trade agreement, right? Um,
and he's saying that deal sucks. It's awful. And people, they're comedians making fun of this because they're saying, wait a minute, the greatest deal maker in the world uh, is now saying that the deal he made is one of the worst ever. It's pretty funny stuff, but you can't make this stuff up, man. So Krista Freeland, I guess, is smarter than Donald Trump because she duped him or tricked him or got a better deal. Now he has to renegotiate it again, or maybe he just likes to negotiate deals. I don't know what it is, but it's pretty funny stuff. So he really hates her, and he doesn't like Polyev either for whatever reason. He's not in the Liberal Party. He's the conservative leader in the opposition. And so in the when the election comes, he's the favored to win, to replace the Liberal government and bring in a conservative government. But see, Trump doesn't like Polyev because the conservatives in Canada are more like the Democrats in the States ideologically, because there's still a progressive wing to the Conservative Party in Canada. So Polyev is still unpalatable to Trump, who is a populist and more right wing than the Conservative Party in Canada. I hope that explains it.
Yeah, no, this is really very interesting. I think I wish I had a larger audience because I think Americans need to know and understand what's happening in the neighborhood. So
Yes.
this is very enlightening for me, and I'm sure for everybody that's watching. Now, I want to stay on Canada politics for a couple of more minutes. Canada is continuing to send aid to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Are the people behind this, or is it like in the United States and Europe, the governments are just doing this, the people are getting fatigued by this? What's the feeling in Canada, the people?
It's divided. People on the sort of the MAGA, the people even call themselves Maple MAGA up here. Those people are opposed. People on the you can almost divide it down political party and ideological lines. So if you're more on the liberal side, generally there's more support for Ukraine. On the populist side, much less. I'd say that's also true in the U.S. It's people view it in different ways, obviously, and it depends on which narrative you believe. So it's a rising point of controversy. I'd say that overall, the support in Canada is still pretty strong for supporting Ukraine, especially since the 51st state rhetoric started, because some people are viewing the threat to Canada in a similar light to what Ukraine is experiencing in the views of some in their struggle for independence and sovereignty. So there's that aspect to it. Plus, Ukraine wanting to, the Zelensky government wanting to align more with the European Union rather than the other way with Russia. So it's sort of a choice. And that's really what's playing out even this morning over in the UK with this emergency meeting of EU leaders, and Justin Trudeau is over there this morning as well. This is a realignment. This blow up in the White House in the past week was a pivotal moment. It really was. It marked that moment signaled a realignment geopolitically of the major powers in the world. The United States no longer aligned with Europe and its traditional allies. It's now more aligned with Russia than it is with its traditional allies. Canada is now being forced with a choice. Will we align with Europe, or will we be absorbed by the US? This is forcing really serious issues and is creating a choice for people that I think is going to play out in the next federal election, where Polyev, the conservative leader we just mentioned, he wanted to fight this next election on the carbon tax issue. He's got this whole campaign for the past couple of years. It's like, axe the tax, axe the tax. It's all he just repeats it over and over again. But now the Liberals have closed this massive gap in Canada where they were almost destined to be completely destroyed politically and be replaced by a record majority conservative government. And now it's a neck and neck race in the polling almost overnight. it's completely changed the political landscape here again. And it's all because of Trump and pushing, like we said, this new worldview of spheres of hemispheric influence and dominance by the great powers. And where will Canada end up in that? We're caught in the middle. Do we go with Europe? And this is actually, I've been telling people this has been coming for months, talking about how our ties to the monarchy as a Commonwealth nation will be integral to our future as a country if we survive, because it's our ties to the UK that can protect us from this threat from the United States. And so this morning, we're seeing political leaders in this country saying that, well, the King of England, who just met with Zelensky yesterday, he's now saying in response to a media inquiry this morning that he doesn't want to comment on the question of Trump and the 51st state issue, that they don't want to comment on it because the king, with the way our constitution is written, can only act on the advice of the minister, which is the first minister, the prime minister, Trudeau. In this case, Trudeau has to ask the king for assistance, basically, because we are a sovereign nation, even though we're still tied to the monarchy. These are kind of complex constitutional issues. And it really raises this whole question. Is Canada actually a real country, a sovereign nation that can stand on its own? Or do we still have to act like a child and go back to the motherland or to the senior monarch? And is that an admission then that we're really not an independent country, that we have to go back to the UK and to England for protection in order to assert our sovereignty, which then people will hear will say, some of people opposed to, who have been trying to tear our government down, they're going to say, well, see, it just proves that Canada is not a real country. That plays into Trump, who's saying that Canada is not a real country. He wants to redraw the imaginary borderline, as he puts it. Bottom line is, all of this is interconnected. People are saying that war in Ukraine has nothing to do with Canada, that it's a faraway war. In fact, it really is playing out very quickly just within the last week, where we're now seeing that war is pivotal. It's integral to what's going to happen with regard to how the whole world is going to be reshaped in the years, decades, and maybe even the millennia ahead. Because what happens in Ukraine will determine how these alliances either survive or are destroyed. NATO, EU, the United States, the relationship there, Canada caught in the middle, the resources that they need there to maintain their dominance as a world superpower in the United States. And it's all because of Ukraine. So don't tell me any more of these people who say that war isn't important to the people here. And you can pick a side and say we should be more with Russia, we should be more with China, or we should align more with the EU. But these are choices people are now going to be forced to make, largely because Trump is forcing these issues. And I think to some degree, even so is Vladimir Putin. In fact, he really is. He's pushing these ideas too. So together, their actions are intertwined. We're witnessing a reshaping of the geopolitical landscape, and how that plays out, I'm not sure. This is why while people are thinking that Trump is a peacemaker because he's going to align more with Russia, right? Maybe, but I think that we're just as close to World War III today, maybe even closer still, simply because he's aligning with Russia. We're not going to have a war with Russia, but now maybe we're going to have a war with the EU and these longtime traditional allies that are not going to roll over either. They're going to try to protect their sovereignty. So we could end up with some strange war that people didn't really see coming. This is a threat to other countries.
Yeah. Let's go back to Trump now. And this realignment, and that's what it is. And we'll talk about that. He said it in that meeting with Zelensky, who he's aligned with. But there was the phone call from Trump to Putin. And the next couple of days, the phone call from Rubio to Lavrov. The next thing you knew, they were meeting in Helsinki. And Europe went crazy. They had their emergency meeting in Paris. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? He's leaving us out of, any of these peace talks. And then you have this meeting, this unbelievable spectacle that took place on Friday in the White House, where this was one of the most incredible smackdowns, public smackdowns that I've ever seen. And certainly in terms of, my God, diplomatic relations between two countries. I mean, it was a shouting match, and basically they kicked Zelensky out the door.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. This this war in Ukraine, and it was Zelensky kept saying this is a war of Russia against Ukraine. It's not. It's always been a war between the United States and Russia. But something significant has changed, and I think those people in the EU know it. They're having another emergency meeting today, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about alignment. And as you pointed out, these are seismic changes that I think are happening, and are happening extremely fast.
Yes.
And I have to question, Trump said, I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with Ukraine. I'm not aligned with anybody. I want peace. The other contradiction, as you mentioned, he wants to be known as the peace president. How can he say that when he's supporting Israel and the genocide with billions of dollars? I mean, you talk about cognitive dissonance. I mean, this is really effing with people's brains. So I agree with you. I've been saying for several years, in fact, I made a film about doomsday. I called it 30 Seconds to Midnight, because I was afraid in 2016 that the US and Russia were so close to nuclear war, okay, that there was no 3 minutes to midnight. I was down to 30 seconds. If I were to issue the film today, it would be the final countdown. We're down to 5, 4, 3. Not only over Ukraine and this realignment that's taking place with UK, with France pounding their chest about sending troops into Ukraine. And then when you look at how explosive the Middle East is right now, that could trigger World War III. So, Rick, I don't think a lot of people really understand how transformative this movement or these actions that Trump has triggered, they don't realize. And certainly in the United States, they don't have a clue. You're either MAGA or you're against it. But I don't think they see what you and I are talking about right now, the geopolitical realignment.
Yes. It's happening, right? And you can point fingers and blame this side or that side, but it's happening. And this is really being triggered at this point by Trump. It's threatening the sovereignty of Canada. He's just blatantly and telling us what he plans to do in Gaza. Did you see that AI video that came out this past week, where it's like Trump posted it on Truth Social, and it shows the vision of Trump Gaza, where it's like a resort, and it shows him and Netanyahu sitting there sipping drinks with umbrellas in them and all this. Have you seen that?
Yeah,
That's sick and twisted. That is, he says it's a meme. That's nothing to joke about. A lot of people have died there, and he's making this, or resharing anyway, posting this sick, twisted video that we're going to kick all the Palestinians out and turn it into a resort. It just blew my mind how insensitive and inappropriate that is. It's just, gross. Anyway, so yeah, this guy can't relate to regular people, that's for sure. And I would say Russia's not blameless in this, because they also are trying to assert their sovereignty and influence geopolitically, which is what great nations do. So they're doing, Putin's just doing what the leader of Russia is going to be doing in this new geopolitical reality, this move toward a multipolar geopolitical reality instead of a unipolar geopolitical reality. Unfortunately, if you're a smaller nation state and you don't have the military to stand up and protect yourself, then you're going to get swallowed up. That's the vision of the future, but that's very authoritarian, regardless of whether you're going to be standing up against China, Russia, the United States. And then the question is, then this raises really deep philosophical questions, right? Do you really have freedom if you're just being absorbed by a larger country? And do you really have sovereignty or democracy if you're being swallowed up by the United States? Does my vote really mean anything then? Because do we really have a choice whether we join the United States when they have an economic gun to our head and they're threatening to destroy the economy? While we are, I think, probably going to be presented with some sort of a referendum here. Well, you can remain Canada if you want to, or you can join the United States if you want to. But if you don't join us, we're going to destroy your economy and you're not going to have any jobs. Well, which way are you going to vote, right? That's coercion. That's economic force, as Trump just blatantly admitted he's going to use to get what he wants. And then you can sit there and play a blame game. Is this Trump reacting to Russia, or is it Russia reacting to the United States? Whatever way you want to look at it, go ahead and look at it that way. But the bottom line is, ordinary, regular, everyday people, we're all caught in the middle, and we're all just trying to live, and we're just being used as cannon fodder in the end, unfortunately.
Yeah, we have no say, and we haven't had say in a long time. Let's get back to the level you were just referring to. You talked about Russia, and Russia definitely is putting Russia first. Russia's sovereignty, Russia's needs, and because of this war in Ukraine and the position of the United States, they've been driven closer to China. And I think that's very obvious to anybody that's been paying attention. Russia and China today, they don't call it an alliance, but it's something more. It's a hybrid. And it's a matter of semantics, in my opinion. And so when you see Trump saying, this is not my war, I want to get out of this, I want a ceasefire, I want the bullets to stop, because I want to focus my attention on China. Now, I think you and I are probably scratching our head and said, this guy's a warmonger. He's not about peace. He's threatening China. And you can't talk about China or Russia independently anymore. You got to talk about them together.
Right.
And when you talk about the spheres of influence, I have to tell you, I mean, I've been living in Russia now for 5 years. I've been coming here since 2016. I do not believe at all that Russia has any designs of expanding its territory and reclaiming the Soviet Union. I mean, that is totally ludicrous. Russia doesn't have the resources to do it, the political clout, whatever. Nobody wants that. This is a trumped up thing, to keep NATO going, keep this war going. Now, Rick, I think that Trump is desperate to make a deal with Putin to end the war in Ukraine. Unfortunately, Putin is holding all the cards, as Trump liked to say to Zelensky. You don't have any cards. Russia holds all the cards. They're winning on the ground. What do they need to give up? Nothing. But I'm wondering if somehow Putin might be able to help Trump save face and not have to own this war. He's claimed it's Biden's war. It seems to me that what happened on Friday in the White House, when the deal didn't happen about Ukraine's resources, simultaneously, Russia's saying, we're happy to make a deal with you. We'll collaborate, work together on rare earth minerals and everything else. Do you think this might be Trump's off-ramp?
He can do what he wants. I don't think that's going to fly politically here very well for him. Ultimately, that may not matter because of his position now as a second-term president. He may not care. It was the very interesting development to see Putin make that offer. How that plays out, I'm really not sure. That's a new wrinkle in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would say this too. It's like for Trump, what I do have a lot of sympathy for the people of Ukraine, and I understand their desire for sovereignty, and I understand the sacrifices that they've made, and I mourn for the people who have died on both sides. This is insane. But what Trump did in that meeting was he showed that he didn't care at all about human life. All he cares about is money. And he told Zelensky, "We gave you $350 billion," and didn't acknowledge, as an ally, the United States, an ally of Ukraine, didn't say thank you to Ukraine or to Zelensky for the sacrifices they made for a war that they've been fighting together. He said, JD Vance sat there and said, "Have you said thank you today?" Right? No. I was disgusted, frankly, by the whole damn thing. I've never seen anything like it. And I think Vance, Trump, both way out of line. Um, and you can view Zelensky any way you want to, but at the end of the day, it just shows that for Trump, it's just about the money and his oligarch friends. And what it was like, we'll protect you, right? But we want all our money back. We want the 350 billion plus interest. So we'll take a $500 billion minerals deal. And then what we'll do is we'll send our big corporations in there to extract all these minerals from your country and exploit your future and take the future from your children. We'll take all the minerals for Americans, and that'll be your security guarantee, because we'll have big companies in there, and the Russians won't dare come near us because we're going to be busy in there, and they won't attack us because we're American companies. That's basically what he was saying. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are being used, exploited. The minerals basically stolen by a guy who's running a protection racket using American nukes, right? Don't come near Ukraine because our big companies are in here extracting all those resources. You see, he'd provide protection for the U.S. companies, but he won't protect the people, and he doesn't care one bit about the people who have died. That's the take that I got on it. The people who have died from Ukraine, their value and the deal is zero. But all the money that the Americans have dumped in, he wants all that back plus interest. And if you want more, then you're going to have to give up even more. I thought it was just a disgusting display of not. It is capitalism, but it certainly isn't free market capitalism or freedom. This is like a fascistic imposition of a business deal on somebody. It's like it's a rigged thing. He's always talking about rigging everything. He's rigged it all so that the Ukrainians don't have a choice. And I mourn for the people who are losing their houses and being bombed and fighting a war with an ally that has proven once again to be completely unreliable. They make promises that they don't keep. Lindsey Graham at the Munich Security Conference the week prior, just a week ago, "We're going to stand with you to the very end, no matter what it takes. And we do want you to be part of NATO." And then a week later, he's in that blow up meeting with Trump. And then Lindsey Graham comes out, the senator, and meets with the media. And he says, "Zelensky has to resign. I've never been more proud of my president standing up for America, kicking him out of the White House." Oh, really? Well, that's a heck of a flip flop, isn't it? Great ally and friend you are. You can't depend on these guys. They'll betray you. So where's the trust? Who would ever trust the United States again as a military ally moving forward? And that's why Europe today is having the emergency meeting, because even they can't rely on the United States. So the United States under Donald Trump has isolated itself. He's alienated everybody. And while he may think that he's making a friend out of Vladimir Putin, I'm sure that the people of Russia have not forgotten the things that the United States has done to them. So he's got no friends over there either. He's got no friends. He says that all these world leaders respect him. No, they're afraid of you, but they don't respect you. So think again, man. The United States is in a lot of trouble, and this isn't going to end well.